Hi, my name is Seth Robles, and I was born and raised in Mexico. And I just want to share with you guys, I'm a member here at Patuxent Baptist Church, and I just want to share with you my testimony, how the Lord, I guess, has been so good to us and to my family. I grew up in a Christian home. I got the blessing of being raised in a Christian home. I remember my grandfather at a really young age, since I was a little kid, preaching always the Bible and preaching the Word of God. And I guess as my father, when he graduated and he finally moved away from home, he moved about 5 or 6 hours away where he grew up, and he took us to another state where we were away from church and I guess away from God, and it took a while for us to get back to church. But I always remember going to church for the first, when I was a little kid, and I remember looking at my dad and he knew all the songs. I remember my dad always singing and he knew all the songs, and I remember asking my dad as a little boy, how do you know all the songs when this is the first time we're coming to church? And he was telling me, well, I used to go to church all the time because your grandfather, remember? And I remember telling my dad, like, yes, but how come we don't go to church anymore now that we live away? And I remember that was a time when my father realized that it was time for us to go back to church. But it still took a few years for my dad to get back to church. It wasn't until one time, I remember my dad would go every summer. We would go back to visit my grandparents, and we would spend about 2 months at their house. I remember being there, and I remember my dad used to drink all the time. And I remember the one time when he went out with his friends, and he got drunk, and he was out partying the whole night. He didn't came back into the house until maybe like 5 in the morning. I remember my grandma talking to him, really upset and yelling at him and telling him, like, if this is what you're gonna do, I don't want you to come to my house anymore. So my grandma pretty much told my dad to leave her house. And I remember my dad got upset and he just told like my mom and me and my brothers, like, we're getting in the car and we're leaving. We're not gonna come back here anymore. I remember we left. It was about 6 in the morning. Now remember, my dad has been drinking all night, so my dad hasn't slept anything. I remember as we were driving, my dad was falling asleep and we almost got in a really, really bad accident. I remember my dad getting out of the car and he was shaking. And I remember looking at him and just kind of like, I remember at the time I was only 7 years old and I was just thinking, what is happening right now? Well, my dad really thought we were gonna die in that accident. It didn't happen. We were able to go home. But I noticed that it was a change in my dad, and that's when he realized it was time for us to go back to church. I was about 7 years old when we decided to go back to church. I remember going to church for the first time again and walking in the platform, and someone showed me from the Bible how to get saved. And again, like I was saying at the beginning, it's been a blessing being, like a Christian since I was a little kid. My grandpa was a pastor, my dad and my mom been in the same church for over 40 years. And now I was able to marry someone that has the same beliefs as me, and I'm so glad that our kids are being raised in a Christian home. And that's how I became a Christian, just by someone many, many years ago sharing with my grandfather the gospel, and then my grandfather sharing it with my father, and then my father sharing it with us. And I hope that continues for the next generations to come in our family. And this is my story.